For those that don't know this, we've got 3 guests online, which you won't see here, except they'll eventually start popping up there. We've got 2 that are going to join us here in person. You're going to have a opportunity to hear from all the 5 main guests here, and it's going to be tight. So if I have to usher some of them along a little bit, forgive me, because we have a hard out here at 4 o'clock. For those of you online, we will see you, but if you don't see yourself, don't worry about it. If you have questions, we'll try to get to some of them. But the ones that we don't get to, we will get back to all of you. So it may take a little while, so bear with us. You know how all this stuff goes. Just a real quick thing, he was mentioning that I was NBC, PBS, NewsHour, and various different correspondents. I saw my share of bad stuff. I was at 3 or 4 school shootings. I was in Congo and got the scared out of me. I was in Iraq and listened to stuff being blown up. But the weird thing is that overwhelmingly, I mean, not even remotely close, what I saw was beautiful period, gorgeous period, people trying to do the right thing. Helping people in conflict zones, carrying things when they needed to, encourage people, different face. I walked away from the whole thing thinking, oh my God, people are gorgeous and they're everywhere. I think I was in 45 different countries, overwhelmingly, nothing even close. The generosity, forgiveness of the people that I bumped into. So I remained optimistic on all of this. So way back when, which is kind of gets me into how I talked to the guest you'll talk to here in a second, is this is like 30 years ago. I was talking to my boss at NBC Nightly News. And just as an aside, I said, yeah, so how come, it was during the Gulf War, how come we cover war 24/7? I mean, why do we do that? Do we ever cover peace? Like, I've never seen it happen. I mean, just like, can we just cover peace for a while? And he said, that's a good idea. How do we do that? So he had some good ideas. And to make a long story short, we wound up with a series called Peacemakers, where we went out and talked to, interviewed, told stories of spectacular peacemakers. People in the Middle East whose families are destroyed, who reaches out across the divide to Palestinian, Israeli, reaching together, building amazing things together. Same in South Africa, all the way down to the reconciliation committees. Amazing. Anyway, we saw so much of this, and we did a number of these these together. And one of them is a guy who's in the room today, and this is Azim Khamisa. So I mentioned him because of all these people. I wound up being really struck by this guy, and we wound up keeping a friendship going after a number of years. I don't know, I think probably many of you know this story, but we'll show it to you in a second. And I met him after his son was killed. So I have a video here from NBC Nightly News. If you haven't seen it, very short, I'll show it to you. Mm-hmm. You're on it. There you
go. Time now for our Friday Making a Difference report and the story of a man whose capacity for forgiveness is astonishing. He suffered the worst loss a parent can ever face, and yet he decided to turn his grief into something positive for himself.
Raised volume. Can't really hear you.
Here's NBC's John Larson.
Okay. Good.
A documentary began the story like this.
14-year-old Tony Hicks shot and killed 20-year-old Tariq Khamisa.
A 14-year-old murders a promising young college student for the cost of a pizza and becomes the youngest child in California history charged as an adult with murder and gets life in prison.
It was like a nuclear bomb going off in my heart.
Azim Khamisa, the father of the victim, buried his only son Tariq, according to their Muslim custom. He climbed down into the muddy grave. It had been raining, and they lowered his son's body, wrapped in a white cloth, down into his open arms.
Yeah, I didn't want to live in there alone. I stayed there a long time. When something bad happens, you can stop that bad from happening to other people.
But when he finally came up, he did something remarkable.
It is wrong to lie, to cheat.
First, he forgave the family of the killer.
It was a defining moment in my life.
Only through that forgiveness,
which in turn helped Azim start the Tariq Khamisa Foundation, speaking together to more than 1 million children about the real pain of violence.
And sometimes it scars the soul forever.
Then Azim visited Tony Hicks, the killer, who had never had a father, and forgave him too.
His forgiveness wasn't something I expected.
Now Azim is lobbying to have Tony released from prison early, like he was his own son.
And when he gets out of prison, what do you hope for him?
We'll have a job for him at the foundation.
So you're going to hire him?
Absolutely.
This is the killer of your son?
Yes.
Tony says now he knows what a real father is.
I had a man forgive me for taking the life of his son.
And he will work for that father, and for many who maybe never had fathers, someday, whether he gets out early or not. John Larson, NBC News, San Diego, California.
That aired on Father's Day, which was how that worked out. Of course, for those of you who don't know the story, Tony did wind up getting out of jail many, many years later, only through the diligence, forgiveness of their family, their hard work. He did, and now he's working with Tony and the organization, speaking to high school kids, middle school kids, helping any way he can. He's a plumber. He's a great guy. A number of us have met him, and it's worked out really, really well. He's helped, the TKF, of course, has helped tens of thousands of people, tens of thousands of kids. You good? Okay. Tens of thousands of kids learn nonviolence. You're learning coping exercises, and it's just been an overwhelming success. He's talked to presidents, Nobel Peace Prize, traveled around the world. I'm sure you, if you haven't already read it, the resume, like all the people who were talking today, goes on and on. 3 years ago, there was kind of a shift. They started talking about So what's an additional phase of this? And this is where their Peace Through Forgiveness chapter started. They wound up on a number of different fronts. The one that caught my ear first was they had, I think, 30 sort of researchers from University of Toronto and again in London to essentially look at forgiveness, look at where turning points are, look at what we could learn, what we could share. It was really, really wonderful. And it started the ball rolling for many of them. And then they wound up with sort of data mining and things like this, which is really, really wonderful. In the end, I remember learning from them 250 organizations that they've verified are working hard for peace around the world, 250 of them. Some of them small and local, some are international, but they've started reaching out, and Peace Through Forgiveness now has coordinated already with 14, and now they're building even more now. So this is something that they hope to bring to a larger scale, and it seems to be working really, really well. We can leave her out for the moment in time. One of the things that we've learned is you think of how do things scale, and think of your own lives. Think of the things that have made a huge difference to you. Whether it's historical, I've just jotted down a few. In the early Americans, the Sojourner Truth, Susan B. Anthony, of course, both way before my time. Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Black Lives Matter. You've all got either large scale exposure or small scale to many, many people that are working for peace. And so what we're trying to do is to gather those together as many possible and sort of help scale it up. One last thing I wanted to say is we're learning that we're filled with tipping points. And one of their thoughts is that if we can get to a tipping point where we can start to get some of these changes, some of these peace changes start to get into the mainstream discussion, it can help. Now, there's famous data now supported by many, many, many people that if you can get to 3.5% of a given population, whether it's a state or it's a nation or worldwide, you can actually affect change. And a lot of the examples I mentioned have done exactly that. All you have to do is think of your favorite sort of pop music thing and think of how many people are involved with that. So 3.5% in the United States, I think, is 11 million people. You can think of like 6 just social media people have more than that going. So anyway, it's doable, and especially Azim will be talking about this a lot coming up. Let me go through the quick bio, and this is a real short bio, just because I don't want to get in the way of them talking, like I already am. Let's see. Well, I'll just mention Azim. Peace Through Forgiveness. His mission is to empower 3.5% of the global population through transformative forgiveness practices. Help foster a worldwide network of peace advocates, impact our world for sustainable change. He's the founder, as I mentioned, of the Tariq Khamisa Foundation and has been in the forgiveness movement for over 30 years. Mubarak Awad, who's going to be online shortly, he founded Nonviolence International, founded it in 1989. He advocates for nonviolence and supports creative, constructive nonviolence campaigns worldwide. He provides fiscal help to partners all over the globe, transformative stories of dynamic, emerging nonviolent movements, registered in DC, but has numerous accolades and enjoys special consultant stature with the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations. This man's been everywhere and done everything, and we're going to get to hear from him today. Gilda Bettencourt of Nonviolent Peaceforce, a nonpartisan, unarmed peacekeeping organization with the goal of protecting civilians and reducing violence in areas with armed conflict. That's a heavy hitter. It has programs in the US, South Sudan, Iraq, Ukraine, Myanmar, Thailand, Indonesia, I'm sure they forget, Philippines, to name a few. Roger Epstein of by the way, Roger, forgive me, it's Maitreya, correct?
Yes.
And yes, thank you. And the Hawaii Forgiveness Project, the Hawaii Forgiveness Project, funded in 2002 by a group of business people and lawyers to encourage forgiveness, gratitude, caring. Maitreya sponsors the Forgiveness Project, the Hawaii Forgiveness Project, the Aloha Happiness Project, and the Peace Through, as I mentioned, Forgiveness Project. Diana Cutlow, she's a peace and justice advocate. She's a former director of development for the Hands of Peace, where she helped Israeli, Palestinian, American youths come together to understand their common humanity. She got her master's degree in peace studies right here in San Diego, has managed the distinguished lecture series at the Kroc Center for Peace and Justice for many years, bringing Nobel laureates and human rights experts from all over the world to speak. We can't get any more impressive group of five than that. It's my great pleasure to get the ball rolling. I think what we're going to do, just because there's different time things, is they're probably going to start online. We're going to be going 5 to 6 minutes on each person. Once we get done, we'll be able to gather it so people can ask questions, so they can talk to each other. But that'll be the first trick. So, Gilda, I think you're going to be up next. From Nonviolent Peaceforce. Can we pull her up? She's up. That was quick.
Yeah.
Yay. Welcome. welcome.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be with you all today. I don't think there's anything more valuable that we could discuss other than forgiveness, because the world needs it so badly today. I think you all are aware of that. And it was very interesting. I'm honored. I want to thank Azim for inviting me to share with you. But the question was, what can we do for more forgiveness in this world? And the first answer that came to my mind was to model it. All of us are in need of forgiveness. I doubt anyone anywhere has no regrets. And by forgiving, perhaps we're in better chances of being forgiven ourselves. That was the first thought that popped into my head. And then I thought, I better talk about how Nonviolent Peaceforce works with forgiveness. So you had a brief introduction to our organization. We've been around for about 20 years, and we basically are an agency that is interested in assisting communities that are under threat through violent conflict. And at their invitation, we send people to help them to add a layer of security, because there's some conflicts that just by having the presence of outsiders, you can deter violence. You know how no one likes to fight in front of the neighbors? Well, there's a certain level of conflict where when outsiders arrive, people pause, because folks who might do things that they don't want other people to witness will have to recalculate how they're going to go about and get what they want. So we create some breathing space for communities that are under threat. But another thing that we do is, in certain times, we help communities that might be at odds with each other to strive towards forgiveness. And how do we do that? The thing that we need for forgiveness, for Nonviolent Peaceforce and for everyone in the world, is to be persistent. We can't give up. We have to keep striving for it. When other people say they don't want to forgive, they don't want to talk to that group, they don't want anything to do with them, we can't be satisfied with that answer. We have to keep looking for those little opportunities that open those doors to possible forgiveness, to possible conversations. And I'll just start with one quick example that I learned from my colleague in Iraq. We have a program in Iraq, and we've been there since 2016, I believe. We were there helping when the government of Iraq and other forces were trying to get ISIS out of Iraq. And we were there to help the civilians that were under threat for that. And it's been a few years now, and we're still there. And my colleague told me the story of a man named Qasim, who was Yazidi. And that's a religious minority in Iraq. And if you're not aware of, when ISIS invaded Iraq, they committed genocide against the Yazidis. And Qasim is Yazidi. And he fled his town of Sinjar up into the mountains with his family in the heat of the summertime and barely survived. But if he had stayed in Sinjar, he would have been killed with many of his friends and their children and their families. ISIS was very brutal. I don't think you need to be told that. When they were able to come down from the mountains safely and go to another part, he restarted his life in a town that is actually closer to Ba'aj, which is south of Sinjar. And it was a Yazidi community. He felt safe with that. And after everything that he went through, he wanted nothing to do with Muslims. He wanted nothing to do with Arabs. He just felt that they had let ISIS do what was done to his community, and he wanted nothing of it. In fact, he's told a story of how if his car needed gas, he would much rather drive 30 minutes to a town that had Yazidis than to drive 10 minutes to a town, Abaj, that he didn't feel safe in. And so Nonviolent Peaceforce actually has a team in Sinjar, and it has a team in Baj, and we've been working with those communities to approach one another, to get to know one another, because when you have that much resentment, sooner or later something's going to come out, and it's not going to be good. And basically, through going back and forth, they were able to get Qasim to Baj, where he met people who cared deeply of what happened to the Yazidis, and it totally changed his mind about Arabs and Muslims and what the future could be. He saw them as all Iraqis. So if you go to Nonviolent Peaceforce's website, you can hear a 15-minute story told by my colleague from Iraq, and it goes into much more detail. But when I listened to it again today, it gave me chills, and it reminded me why I do everything I can to bring more forgiveness into this world. And I know you would like to join me in that. So thank you all.
Thank you so much. We're going to go to Roger Epstein now. Thank you. That was lovely.
Aloha. How do we bring forgiveness to the world? What a great topic, and I'm delighted to be part of the panel today to talk about peace through forgiveness and contemplate this idea. First, I'd like to say that in the almost 20 years that I've been the host and facilitator of the Hawaii Forgiveness Project, I've lost my ability to be surprised about what people can forgive. We gave a Forgiveness Hero Award to a man who forgave the murderer of his wife so that his young children would not grow up in hatred. A daughter forgave her father for the murder of her mother. A woman forgave the murder of her child so that her other children would more easily let go of their anger. And one of 4 daughters forgave her father for sexually abusing all the daughters, murdering the newborn baby of one of the daughters, and by forgiving, this daughter got her life back at age 50. Yet we live in a culture that glorifies revenge in movies, domination rather than appreciating collaboration in sports, and doesn't promote forgiveness much at all. Our society almost totally ignores the messages of our ancient wisdom that forgiveness sets us free from the past, and it's essential for us to live effectively in the present. We need to create new mythologies, as Joseph Campbell said in his later years, and teach these stories to our children. There's a program I've been presenting for many years now, which I suggest could be a first step toward adopting forgiveness as an important part of our way of life. It's called Living from the Reality of Our Connectedness. Quantum physics has absolutely proven that the substance of all of us and everything physical is simply waves of energy to which we're all truly connected to one another. If we blew up an atom so the neutrons and electrons were the size of tennis balls, the atom would be the size of the Earth. Try to get your mind around that. Everything is made up of 18 tennis balls circling the Earth, and the vast majority of everything, including the tennis balls sometimes, is an infinite ocean of energy in which we are all immersed. Almost all religions recognize the existence of this universal energy and called it God, Allah, the Great White Spirit, and in Hawaii, Keakua. Joseph Campbell and others, their studies bolstered these ancient religious conclusions academically by reviewing the expressions in art and literature of the connectedness of everything in many hundreds of cultures. And finally, we know from our own experience of thinking about our parents or children and the phone ringing and the many other synchronicities that Carl Jung recognized as part of our collective unconscious, that we are actually connected to each other energetically. This truth has been firmly established. So since we're truly connected to each other, why don't we actually live from that reality? My great friend and mentor, Jerry Jampolsky, who wrote a book on forgiveness and was the inspirational founder of the Hawaii Forgiveness Project, had a good metaphor for living from this reality. You go to a Beethoven concert and love the music, so you go home and buy a piano. At first, the music sounds like nothing, but after some practice, it begins to sound like Beethoven. And after more practice, the notes are in your fingers and you're making nuances. Now you're living this. Just like if I hit my hand against a wall, I know it's going to make a noise and I'll feel it. I don't just believe that. It's part of my operating system for living life. So my first step for getting the world to accept the at least 4,000 to 5,000-year-old messages of forgiveness is to radically promote the truth that quantum physics, part of our new religion of science, has verified just a short 100 years ago that we're all connected to each other energetically. To spread this message, we can create books and movies as myths of this truth, put out information on mass media, and perhaps most importantly, teach it in our earliest school programs. And we can make this simple knowledge a part of all of our consciousness. Once we understand that we're all connected, it becomes much clearer that forgiveness is essential. And we've got to stop hurting our fellow humans through criticism, revenge, and judgment of each other, because we're actually hurting ourselves when we do this. And of course, in the larger picture, this leads to war and planetary destruction. So in my view, now is the time, and we have the tools today to do this. Mahalo and aloha.
Thank you, Roger. Good. We'll get back to all these people in a little bit. The Mubarak Awad is hopefully, oh yes, I see his picture. Good. I was hoping we'd be able to. Mubarak, as we mentioned, Nonviolence International and your long history of doing great work around the world. You're up.
Thank you. I have to take something in the middle of my screen.
You're good here.
Yes. I'm very happy to be here, to be with you. And it's so good to see Azim and all his friends there. Azim is a very precious friend. And whenever you are down and you need something, just take one of his books and read it. And you get up and say, wow, I'm all right again. Forgiveness to me is also personal, but not like Azim. My father was shot in the head when I was 5 years old. And the one who shot him, he didn't know that my mother and 7 children, and also her mother-in-law, suddenly we have no family, and then they came and take our house, and if we don't leave, they'll shoot us all. And suddenly, she looked at us after we left the home, we were in the street, and she put us together like, chicken with all those small, tiny feet of ours there. She said, one thing, I don't want you to revenge. I don't want you to carry a gun. I don't want you to shoot a human being. The one who shot your dad doesn't know what he did to our family and to our future. So don't do that to any human being. 5 years old, it didn't pass a lot. But later on, understanding what she said, that each of us as kids or as adults or whoever we are, we need a mother, we need an advocate, we need somebody, a teacher, to tell us, wait a minute, you don't need to revenge. There is other way. There's other alternatives. Try to think other ways than just carry a gun and kill someone else. And those are the idea of forgiveness, by finding that person who could guide you, who could make your life a little bit better for at that time. And it happened. That gave me the power, the strength to do what I have been doing for nearly 60 years, to promote peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians, between Jews and Arabs. And I was hated by both the Jews and the Palestinians because of my thickness and activities of nonviolence. I brought Palestinians who their loved ones were killed by Jews, and I brought Jews whose loved ones killed by Palestinians. And I brought them together in a room, and I said, would it be nice that we could talk together and stop this madness of killing each other? And you could be the persons who could help to in your community not to have more killing. Wow. The first thing it was, no, it is this, it is that, it's your fault, it's his fault. We cannot talk to each other. You are Palestinian, we are Jews, it cannot be done. After 2 days or 2 sessions, they start drinking coffee together, laughing and understanding that there is better thing than revenge and than killing. Forgiveness is very, very powerful, but sometimes it's very, very hard. And having it hard, I try to understand the concept of forgiveness by choosing people I like who are already dead, like Gandhi. What Mahatma Gandhi said about forgiveness, what Martin Luther King said about forgiveness, what Mother Teresa said about forgiveness, and what Mandela said about forgiveness. They all have good ideas to forgive. Gandhi said, if you are weak, you cannot forgive. You have to be strong to forgive. Then, my favorite one was Mandela. Mandela, after they tell him you have to go, he said, I want to look back to where my cell was for many, many years, because I want to keep all my anger, frustration, and hate in this place, and I want to be a new man when I step out, because I want to forgive everything you did and hurt me, and you took everything I have in a character. You want me to be more than a slave, and you as guards, it was a tough situation, but now I'm free. And Mandela, he didn't stop there. When he became a president, he took some of those who hate him so much, who destroy their character, his character in prison, and he said, come and help me as a president of this country. And the guard came and helped him there. This is forgiveness.
Can I interrupt it for a second? Please, yes. We're just going to have to go to the next people, but you will be able to stay with us, correct? So we can have people ask you questions.
Yeah.
Good. Yes. Good. Diana, Azim, yay. Thank you so much. Have a seat. Azim. Why don't we start with Diana Cutlow? Diana?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mubarak.
Thank you. Also, thank you to the speakers who have come before. They're people that I deeply admire, and for me, many of them are that role model that Gilda talked about. I was really curious about the concept of forgiveness and where it intersects with peace, because what we're talking about here today is building peace through forgiveness. And that starts perhaps with individual forgiveness, but it also has to go well beyond that. And some of the things I was thinking about is forgiveness as a step. And where does this step fit in that long journey towards reconciliation? Those other steps could include accountability, but they might not. They could include reconciliation, reparations, re-education. These are all different steps along this journey to reconciliation, but forgiveness certainly has to become one of them, because to live with a neighbor next door that you have not forgiven would be torture every day for you and for them. It's not a step that necessarily always goes forward either. One of the things about forgiveness that's so troubling when you try to act on it is that you forget that you've forgiven sometimes, and you go backwards, and you have to do it again and again. It might go around in circles, it might go backwards, you might jump forward 3 steps and feel like I've got this, I'm there. And then the person says something, or the country does something, or something happens that sets you back. And you've got to remember how you got there. You've got to do that journey again. You've got to have the courage to try again, knowing that sometime you won't be going back anymore. One thing that we can do in this room, and anybody who's listening, to bring more forgiveness to the world, is to spread these concepts, but not as a prescription. I can't give you a dose of forgiveness. I can't tell you how it's going to work for you. And we can't tell a group or a country or a tribe how it's going to work for them. It has to come from each of those individuals or groups or tribes in their own special circumstances. And they're different for everybody. This has been a very interesting journey for me, because as I was preparing for today, my mother passed away. And as I read her letters, I saw that she had had a much more difficult life than I ever knew. And I realized that she had forgiven her father so that I did not live in hate. And I was able to forgive her not sharing that with me. because I knew how important it was for me not to have that hanging on me like a shroud that I couldn't shrug off. It was beautiful to read both the letters describing what she had been through from her mother to his brothers, and the letters to her sisters about her life as she chose to live it without hate in her heart. The personal to the political. I'm starting work next week with a politician. I'm fascinated with how we can take these personal concepts and bring them into the political world. Yeah. But I will say it starts with the stories. It starts with Azim came and spoke to the Israeli and Palestinian and American youth that we have here in San Diego for 13 years. The program has ended now. And in Chicago for 21, we did the same thing. And there, one of our facilitators of the Palestinian delegation is here with us today. I think he probably watched in amazement when he saw these youth hearing Azim's story, seeing Azim's story, seeing the photographs of his son and of his son's murderer and them coming together. At first, they couldn't believe it was possible, but by the end, they were crowding around him asking, how can we do this? And that's the first question you have to ask. Once you want to know how, you will find an answer. Thank you.
Thank you for all being here, and thank you, John, and thank you, Andrew, and all our world-class panelists. Let's give them a little bit more love, yeah? So I've been in this space since Tariq passed away 30 years ago, and I cannot tell you, looking back, that everything that has manifested in my life because of choosing forgiveness instead of revenge, yeah? Beyond my wildest imaginations. I don't think that forgiveness is so well understood, because there is this connotation that me forgiving Tony is in some way I'm condoning his act. It's not about Tony. It's about me. And I think one of the hardest things is to separate yourself from the offender. Even the scriptures tell us, vengeance is mine. And I always believe that karma always balances. Yeah? Now, Tony's joined us and he's saving a lot of other kids, but he still gets up in the middle of the night with sweaty palms. He has to live with the killing an innocent, unarmed human being. And he didn't need to spend 25 years in prison. I think that's a little too long. I was there at his parole hearing because I knew he can save a lot of kids. And he is. Yeah, I didn't know that. But I think that shows the power of forgiveness. Here's the issue, that when I wrote my first book, From Murder to Forgiveness, which was in 98, 3 years after Tariq died, you almost had to go back to the scriptures to learn about forgiveness. There wasn't much on there. Today, there are over 1,000 clinical studies that have validated that forgiveness, A, improves your health, B, puts you in the present and not in the past. It promotes peace, it promotes happiness. On the other hand, if you live in anger, resentment, and hatred, who are you hurting? As Mubarak was talking about Mandela, I was thinking that when they asked Mandela, why did you forgive your oppressors? He said, if I didn't, I'd still be in prison. Yeah. Desmond Tutu, I've met him a few times. He passed away. Without forgiveness, we do not have a future. And I'm glad you're working in politics now, because there's talk of civil war. There's talk of Third World War. And I know this is a moonshot. We're trying to get to 300 million people. But really, I couldn't sit back and do nothing. Before we start killing our brothers and sisters, let's stop this mayhem. And I don't see another path than forgiveness. I mean, right now, if you're not with me, you're against me. We are so divided. That was not the view our founders had. So I started, March 6th, which was Tariq's 50th birthday. He died at 20, was a kind of a milestone day to start Peace Through Forgiveness. And I'm so grateful because we've been studying in the back, we've been studying for about 3 years with college graduates and six volunteers, and you'll meet some of them today. The 250 organizations that are working on world peace, including the United Nations, where I spoke several years ago. But they're not working together. They're all working in their own silos. Peace through forgiveness is not so much about peace through forgiveness. It's about lifting up all of this good work being done, as you heard from all of the panelists. And then we had a couple more events, and on the event June 23rd at Cindy's Place and Vibes, I invited 14 of these 250 organizations. Most of them I know because I've been doing this work and they all showed up. It's encouraging. So our goal now is to do even a larger event on September 27th, 2025. My vision is we do one like Lionel Richie's We Are the World. And what I want to do is to mainstream the power of forgiveness to bring us peace. So that's where I'm going with
that. Say again? Oh, yeah, of course. Let's take some questions from the audience. We'll also take some from the online audience. But first of all, any questions for anybody about what they've been doing? Come on. Yeah, questions. For them or the people online?
Sure. I'm Laura.
Hi, Laura.
I'm going through my own grief right now. Thank you very much. I'm going through my own grief like you, Diane, and I am experiencing a lot of anger. And yet I know that the person who hurt me is so damaged that she cannot do differently. And I don't know how to reconcile those things. Like, anger is an important part of grief. I think it's a step in the grief process. And I'm angry about what has happened, even if I'm not angry at her. But also I feel like I'm angry at her at the same time as I forgive her because I know she can't do better. Can you speak to that? Like, how do a million Palestinians not forgive while also feeling anger and hurt at the losses?
There's a peace scholar named John Paul Lederach, and he talked about the moral imagination. And what that means is having an imagination of what the future could be if you were able to accomplish what you want to accomplish. When he worked with people in Colombia and other peace agreements, he actually had groups sit down together and write out or draw what they thought that future could be if they could let go of vengeance, let go of possession of land, let go of whatever it was that was holding them back from that future. And until they envisioned that, they couldn't possibly see how to get there. So whether it's personally or whether it's a whole country trying to come to a peace agreement, if you can sit down and say, what could my life look like? What could my country look like? What could our world look like if we were able to let go of this or give up that or understand this? And once you have that picture, could you laugh again? Could you hug somebody you can't hug right now? Could you sit down with a neighbor for dinner that you can't touch right now through a wall or through a barrier of your own religion or choices that you've made? If you can draw it or sing it or put it down on paper, you'll be able to get there. And so I would start with that. I would don't worry about the fact that you feel anger or grief or anything now. Think about what your world could be. And as soon as you have that vision clearly in your mind, you'll find a way to let those other things fall.
You know, I think you have to realize, and this is what we've experienced, you don't forgive right away. Somebody who hurts you, it hurts. And it takes a while, just like if you hurt yourself physically, it takes a while for that to heal. And when you said these are steps in grief, yeah, there's a number of steps in grief and there's a number of steps in forgiveness, and it just depends on what it is. but you can't expect that you're going to forgive immediately. I think you have to go through the steps. You're angry if that's what it is. You need to get clear on what's happened. What Diane just said is right. There's ways to look at it and techniques, but don't be unhappy. I think you're off to a good start because you're already seeing the other side of it. And the anger eventually will subside. And it sounds like, you'll get there, but give yourself a break and it can happen in its own time.
Mubarak and Gilda, I noticed you shaking your head. Yes. Anybody want to jump in? Gilda, how about you first?
Yes. I think you mentioned the Palestinian in Gaza. Do they have the right to forgive or not? And I think that we have many people, especially a lot of Palestinians, who have been writing and trying to see and deal with the issue of forgiveness. And this is something new in the Middle East, forgiveness. However, they are starting doing something from the Quran, from the Islam, and from other things that are really well being done to teach the people in Gaza, the young people, to have a heart to forgive. It's going to be difficult, but it's a process that there's a fellow, his name is Muhammad Abu Nimr, and his wife, also Ilham Nasser. They are doing a lot of work in schools, that when the schools will be open in Gaza, they have curriculum for forgiveness for them. And that's an important, we don't know how it's going to work, but things are working well if a lot of people are doing their job in making peace and making a better world for everybody.
Thank you. Gilda? Gilda, how about you? Hi.
Well, I think everyone has actually already answered this question beautifully. Perhaps the only thing I could add is from the Nonviolence Peaceforce perspective. Our organization isn't, we're standing by people who need forgiveness and who need to forgive and try to support them in that effort. And some of us here in this room, in this gathering, may not necessarily be dealing with issues of forgiveness right now personally, or you may, and even if you are, but you may also know other people who desperately need forgiveness or desperately need to forgive. And I guess I encourage you to be present in that process if you think the people want that. Nonviolent Peaceforce doesn't go anywhere where it's not invited. All the countries where we're working in right now, we were invited by the local communities. So if you are being invited to stand by someone while they're trying to go through a forgiveness process, I wish you the best. And I encourage you to go to Nonviolent Peaceforce's website. There is some resources there about unarmed civilian protection that might be useful to you. Like Azim said, it's not, Nonviolent Peaceforce isn't interested in doing this all by themselves. There's a role for everyone. So we make all our resources available online for people to learn from what we've experienced. So I'll stop there.
Yeah.
Hey, Azim,
I might just, I think we've got all the answers here, but Laura's question is a good one. There's a good Turkish adage that says, he who conceals his grief does not find a remedy for it. So it's a healthy way to grieve. Grieving is very important. Roger said that. I grieved for 3.5 years. Complicated to lose a child. But at the same time, at some point, unless you forgive, you remain a victim. I didn't want to go through life on crutches. I had a very full life when Tariq was alive. I wanted that life back. We all do. So essentially, the thing that I like to say that at some point, after you've done your grieving, that forgiveness is the healing balm that can change your future. You can't change the past. but you can't change your future. And you don't want to go through life on crutches. You don't want to go through life as victim. So it is an elixir to that extent. Yeah.
If I can add a quick thing, the many peace stories I got to do, there was one about the parent circle, which Robbie Damlin, her son, first week of his being a sentry on the Israeli border, Jewish mom, was shot and killed by a sniper. He went into deep grief. Later on, a Palestinian young man whose brother was a Palestinian and killed, went through also deep grief, and I suspect may actually have had something to do with the original death of Robbie. Well, the interesting thing about it was there were wonderful things said. I got to interview both of them at length, but what I never forgot is that the young Palestinian boy and the Israeli boy who died came together in an unusual way, in that when I met them, the young Palestinian boy was wearing the wedding clothes that the young Jewish boy was supposed to wear to his wedding the next week. So here the young Palestinian boy is literally now donning the skin and the clothes of the young Jewish boy who was killed, and now sharing their grief. And I've never been able to get this idea out of my head of sort of almost living in the skin or living in the clothes, literally, and how it starts to affect change. So I thought your question was really, really good, and it may take a while. What about questions online? Are we running into any? Okay, you want to bring one up?
Okay, testing. So we have a question from Zoom, and this is directed towards Roger. Would you be able to expand upon your idea of creating new mythology? What would this look like, and what is the purpose?
So,
Could everybody hear that?
I've done a lot of work with the Joseph.
question?
Can either you can repeat it or I can, but expand on this idea of creating new mythologies.
So I've done a lot of work with the Joseph Campbell Foundation for the last 30 years, and Campbell's ideas are that everything is all our stories are myths. They're stories that tell us how to live. And for instance, Jesus talked in parables, because if I tell you this is what you're supposed to do, you don't get it the same way as if I tell you a story about it and you get the message yourself. You get an aha. So my sense is that we don't just want to go out and talk about, hey, we're really connected to each other. I mean, there's a forum for that too. But for the mass media, for the mass audiences, we find a story that shows all the things we're talking about. I was envisioning a story where you have two people that are at the same incident and damaged in the same way. One of them seeks revenge and the other forgives. This is a movie or a myth. And so we see what happens to the guy who seeks revenge. His life becomes horrible. But the one who forgives moves on. It's better. He does a lot of good. And that's what I'm talking about.
Please.
I was just going to say that if you know, there's also clinical studies now that promote that if you stay in anger, resentment, and hatred, it typically manifests into terminal illnesses like cancer. It happened to O.J. Simpson's story. Remember, Nicole's father was so gung-ho to get O.J. Simpson, and eventually Nicole's father got cancer. It's very corrosive. I remember I did a workshop. Been doing workshops for forgiveness, teaching how do you forgive people that have harmed you and how do you forgive yourselves, because at some level we've all harmed as well. I've been doing this for almost 25 years, and I remember doing this one in St. Paul, Minnesota, and there was this lady that nice Jewish lady that says, Azim, you don't get it. It's a 2-day workshop. I said, what is it I don't get it? He said, I'm trying to forgive Hitler. And you could see the anger. Her face was totally etched. And I said, yeah, I acknowledge that. The Holocaust, probably one of the worst blemishes in our world history, 6 million innocent Jews. I said to her, let me tell you something. The higher power knows how to deal with Hitler better than you do or I do. And as I speak to you right now, know that the higher power is dealing with Hitler. Why do you want Hitler to live in this meager real estate of your psyche? I can see, how's it working for you? I can feel your anger. It's palpable. I can feel your hatred. Let Hitler go so love and joy can live there, knowing the higher power is dealing with Hitler because there's no escaping wrongdoing. And kind of the bulb went on, as I think somebody like Roger said, and aha. And even at the end of the second day, those lines were starting to fade. A month later, I got this beautiful card from her and thanking me for the workshop. And there was a PS on the bottom, my husband thanks you. We've been married for 25 years, and now we have the most loving relationship because Hitler doesn't live here anymore, yeah?
John, let me just say one other thing. I think I kind of mishandled the question because I think she was asking me about myths about connectedness, but it's the same thing. We can start these myths showing connectedness as well as forgiveness.
Yes.
Diana, let me just put a question to you. Anything from your vast experience, whether it was all the Nobel laureates or that you just sort of took away either on a personal level, like you just shared, or a larger scale?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, but it goes right back to what you started with today. When I was going down the elevator with one of our speakers who had been with the UN Humanitarian Affairs Division, he had been in all the worst places in the world where all the humanitarian crises were unmanageable, unfixable, and they had to do what they could. And 2 little ladies were in the elevator with us who had heard his speech, and they said, how do you keep living? How do you maintain any optimism in the world? And he said, because every place that I went, there were people helping each other. There were people building houses and finding food and taking care of babies and, doing whatever they could to heal someone's wounds. So he said he saw such beauty amid that distress. And that's what kept him going. Those are the people that he remembered. Those are the ones that he held in his heart. Same thing. What do you choose to hold in your heart?
You said another question from the audience?
This one's from Marianne Liebman. Apologies if I didn't get the name correctly. What mechanism are you using to try to bring peace movements together?
Second.
What mechanisms are you using to bring peace movements together?
Oh, okay. Well, our vision here is to. Is it working? Yeah.
Yes.
Our vision here is to come together as one voice. There's 250 organizations, as I shared earlier, that are in the peace movement. Now they have different, Gilda here is Nonviolence Peaceforce. There's people working on nonviolence like my brother Mubarak Awad. Roger Epstein is a forgiveness project. There's one in London, Marina Cantacuzzo. There's actually a forgiveness project at Stanford. Fred Luskin is a good friend of mine that runs it. There are people working on restorative justice, which is another form of the work that we're doing. Or there's another organization called Search for Common Ground, which is, again, they're working to find common ground. But when you bottom line all of these organizations, the end goal is peace. And we all want world peace, right? I mean, I've not had any pushbacks on it. But we're not working together. So that's the vision that we feel that, as I said, I invited 14 of the 250 organizations. Of course, most of them I knew, that showed up on June 23rd, including the people that are on the screen here. but there's so many more. And I think if we can come together, 300 million people today, I mean, there are influencers who have that kind of number. I mean, with the advent of internet, those numbers are definitely possible. So that's our goal. And again, I want to kind of reach out to all of you here because, most of you are also very skilled at the work you do. We need people that understand social media. We need people that understand communication. We need people that understand event planning. We need people that can help us figure this out because I know that science tells us that 3.5% is a tipping point. Actually, you can Google that. There's a lady called Erica, I can't think of, Chernoworth, I think is her last name, that actually studied all of these nonviolent movements, which are twice as, if you look at the history, nonviolence movements are twice as successful as violent ones. Yeah. So the idea is that we need to get most of this stuff mainstream. I mean, the Tariq Khamisa Foundation, which I started in my son's name, is now also in its 30th year. This October next month, we start our 30th year. We reached 2 million kids. And the one thing that we've been able to teach these kids is forgiveness, which has totally changed their trajectory going forward. So I know it's teachable. I know it's an elixir, but it's not mainstream. Go ahead, Cindy.
What happened? Oh, I don't even. I don't like.
Yeah, you do.
The online community.
Okay. I'm really thinking about, well, there were two things that was brought to my attention that a very dear friend of mine, Liz Fausch, who's not here, that has participated in this, the development of this event, is that there really is not a Department of Peace. We have a Department of War, whatever, all these other things. So to have an umbrella in the government around peace would be amazing, number one. And number two, as I'm sitting here, what I'm really thinking about is how critical it would be to get this as part of the Department of Education in curriculums around peace, whatever that process is, in the schools, as mandated as conflict, whatever that is, that is really what your program has done with the youth is so critical because it really begins at a young age too. And so much. So I'm just thinking about, as you're saying, you have to bring these organizations together in some way, but how do you lobby the government? I'm seeing more of the connection between the political world and the nonprofit world and the private sector. And I've never seen it. It's such a great, we're at an apex now in the political realm that makes a huge difference too, in terms of, anyways. So my question is, yes, you said we need to do this, but the power of collectivity is really, I think, the transformative issue here.
Exactly. And I think that is something that we are trying to figure out. We don't have the answer how to get to 300 million people. Have the passion and the determination. I'm not going away. I paid a big price. I'm not going away.
Yeah, could I just
stay with it?
Add one thing?
I like to add.
Can I just interrupt one thing? If anybody here has been to Rwanda, I've been there 4 or 5 times. Right after the genocide, basically the women essentially took over the government and they started the Forgiveness Foundation. Right. So all of a sudden, and it's still going, they're in, from, I'm going to get this wrong, but I think from about 4th or 5th grade through high school, they're taught every year about the power of forgiveness because of the horrific things that happen there. So it does happen.
I like to add to the last person who said that we need a Department of Peace. I think every country needs a Department of Peace. Yes. And we could request that they'll give us from 1% to 5% of the amount of money they give to the Department of War. We could do a lot of work.
Kamala Harris, I heard that she was at that there was some conference or convention, was it in Switzerland or Sweden recently? And it was a peace conference. Did you hear about that, Diane? What? Yes.
Conference is going on all the time, but they are under-resourced. I think, that's a really good point. There is also United States Institute of Peace, which is funded by Congress. They're in Washington, D.C. I encourage you to go visit if you get a chance to. They have many, many different organizations that they're working with, many different country areas that work with, and they've got an outstanding website. I think these are the kinds of organizations that Peace Through Forgiveness can connect with. There's also an Alliance for Middle East Peace in Israel, Palestine. There are dozens, almost 100, I think, organizations there. They just did a project where they used AI to have the two sides talking to each other. They each spoke in individual groups, and AI kind of took all of these different comments and then shared them with the other sides. Some really fascinating things that can be done. And I think this forgiveness element is one that's been missing somewhat from the peace building side, which has been very focused on distributing resources equally or things like that.
Can we take a couple of people that are trying to ask questions? Maybe the gentleman who raised your hand. Sir, hello. Yeah, here we go. Yeah.
Thank you. My name's Bill.